In 2020, we'd been working for about 2 years and spent millions of dollars, and for us, a small underdog company, a large percentage of our capacity to develop a new email service to compete with Gmail, which in itself right there already sounds kind of crazy. But hey.com is our alternative to something like Gmail for a small niche of people who care enough about email that they would want to pay for a better product than Gmail. And we thought, you know what, this is a big fight we're asking on here. We're going up against one of the biggest behemoths in big tech, Google, with perhaps the most entrenched product after search, Gmail, that they've been honing since 2004 and have 1.5 billion users on. Those are sort of long odds for at least a direct fair fight, which is of course why we were never interested in direct fair fight. We launched a product that was for pay to make email better. $99 a year to get a far superior email experience that was based on new ideas. As great as Gmail is, and Gmail is a great product, it is also stuck in 2004. So we brought it up to date in 2020, and as we launched it, we of course needed to be on the Apple App Store with our Hey app there, and we needed to be in the Google Play Store. And we made it for about 2 days before Apple showed up at our door with a ransom letter for 30% of our revenues. This is their tactic of juicing services revenues these days. It is to essentially take a 30% cut of the rest of the economy. And in the App Store, that goes by forcing app makers to use their payment processing platform. And when you do that, Apple takes that horrendous 30% cut. Well, I think we were one of the first companies, we were certainly perhaps the only one who had spoken so loudly, who simply said no when Apple showed up with their ransom letter. And at first they were very puzzled by this. They were like, no one ever says no to us, we're freaking Apple, what are you doing here? And then they started with the threats, which was essentially, we will kick you out of the App Store, we'll ban you from the App Store unless you give us 30% of your revenues. And we just kept escalating and doubling down on that fight, where anyone else who had not lived and internalized that underdog fighter mentality would absolutely have backed down. Any professional manager taking a analysis to the board would never in 1 billion years have gotten sign-off on this epic Titanic battle we had with Apple, because it was high stakes. If Apple had won and they were able to shut us down and we weren't willing to cave, we would have lost our investment, all this time that they've gone into it. You simply can't produce a mass market application like hey.com these days without having a presence in the Apple App Store or in the Google Play Store. You simply have to be on these mobile platforms, which is one of these problems. This is why I've been involved with the whole anti-monopoly battle, but that's a different story. Just this idea that you can't fight, that you don't have to lay down, that just because someone is bigger than you does not make them right, and does not mean that you're out of options, is a huge part of the underdog ethos. And that underdog ethos, I think, is perhaps best crystallized when there is conflict, when there is a fight. When we first got started with Basecamp, our target was Microsoft Project. Microsoft Project was the product that people brought up when we talked about project management. And it was often in terms of burn down charts and Gantt charts and all of these other things that the Microsoft Project did at the time. And we went fiercely in opposition to that, coming out with an entirely different philosophy of what project management should be, that it should be about communication and collaboration rather than stats and charts and burn downs and whatnot. And I think having an enemy, if you will, to focus your attention is just an incredibly powerful tool. You got to be careful that it's not your only tool. I think businesses occasionally get so single-tracked on just their competition that they forget to be themselves, and that doesn't result in compelling or interesting products or services. But if you use it sparingly as a salt or perhaps even a chili pepper, it can really fire you up when it matters. And I think occasionally it does matter. Occasionally there are these points where you have to take a stand and you have to pick a fight. We took a stand, picked a fight, and perhaps at a higher or longer odds than I'm typically all that comfortable with. There's a mythology around entrepreneurship that is just a bunch of risk-addicted folks who just love to gamble everything on Red 24, but that's not actually true in my case. I found a lot of entrepreneurs actually are not very risk interested. They're quite risk averse. They just see risk a different way. But this was one of the riskier things that we did. But thankfully, it also paid off because we had this incredible launch in 2020 that culminated with the fight with Apple. We signed up 20 or 50 times as many customers as we had anticipated because we got such attention to our cause, and this was one of the things that got the ball rolling with a lot of antitrust legislation and so forth. But just the sense that, you know what, we're going to do this. We're going to stand for our principles. I think this is something else that customers recognize in Underdog companies, that they actually believe something. And why do they believe something? Because they're typically run by people who believe something, who have, if not the whole influence, an outsized influence of what the company actually does. Again, when you're dealing with companies, especially large ones, run by professional management, the singular opinions of that professional manager is typically a very small drop in the large ocean of what this company is going to stand for. And most of the time, what the company is going to stand for is whatever it think it should stand for, such that consumers or customers will respond favorably to it. I think you can see that in some of these recent cases that's come up with Budweiser, or some of these other things where you're just finding companies that are just flailing around trying to find out, what does the customers want us to say? Do you know what? That's, to me, already an odd situation to be in. And I think it is difficult for a lot of customers to respond positively to that. They will respond to, hey, here's something who authentically believe what they say. They're not just saying it to make a sale this moment, this week, this month. They're saying it because this is actually what they believe for the long term. Do you know what? That's interesting. That kind of dedication and conviction is increasingly rare in an economy that's dominated by professional managers who are just in charge of making whatever the next quarterly numbers. We went up in the Apple case against Apple in a long shot, in a way that, you know what, if we were going to present that to a board, that was going to look bad. And the payoffs that are present in such a gamble, I think, are intrinsic to that underdog identity.